Hey everyone, welcome to a quick demo of PyThink, my extension for Py, which is a coding agent, but also this works with Claude Code, but it doesn't work as deeply as it does with Py, and I'll show you what I mean by that. Py is basically a set of tools for thinking with agents on the computer. So for me, this is mostly a note-taking exercise, but this can work even for coding projects. A lot of the same patterns are useful, and I'll show you what I mean as we get into this. But this is the main loop. You can use /capture to record your thoughts that you've been trying to put down on paper but couldn't be bothered to. Then when you've talked about them with the agent for a while and liked the format, you can write crumb, which is a breadcrumb. You leave a trail of breadcrumbs of your own thinking, so you can see what your current questions are, what the themes were, and the momentum. The idea of this is to show you how your trajectory of thought evolved over time. Then when you come back later in a new session, you can run recent, which will basically reflect over the content created from this and help bring you back in. And then after a few sessions of doing this, you can reflect and see in broader loops what kind of patterns you're in and keep winding this process around itself ongoing. With Py, there are some cool automatic features that get added onto this, but with Claude, this is what you would get out of the box. So if I come over here, I actually tried to record this once already and then failed to hit the record button, so I've already computed like this whole session on the right, but that's actually going to save us a bunch of loading screen time, so that's probably good. Basically, if you start up a session like I have here with Claude, so this is a terminal. I should back up. This is a terminal. I'm in Obsidian. This is the graph view of this vault that we're in here, and this is the collective set of all the notes behind my Nichecraft Substack newsletter. So the thinking that I've done about agents and tools for thought and memory systems and networks of agents and how you should think about them as a design primitive and create tools to work with agents. All of it is in this one area here. And this is sort of a contained vault for thinking where I'm also testing these like AI-powered tools for thinking and self-reflection and metacognition in that context. So I'm trying to dog food on the problem domain itself. And you can see that reflected in my notes here. So I've been working on the Thinking with AI series. I articulated my thesis recently and started working on crafting your cognitive niche, which is a post I'm hoping to publish soon that this video should be attached to, actually. And if I look in here, excuse me, can I hit this? Yeah, crafting. If I jump to this draft, this is a skeleton of what that post is going to look like ultimately in here with a bunch of links to the notes that I think are relevant. And the way that this works is that most of the vault is made up of, if I go back to the graph, atomic notes. So these small chunks of content here that are basically fragments of things I've said that are things that when I read the title of each of these, they are basically things I've said in conversation or would remind me of phrases that come to mind instantly, right? And these are then sewed together into drafts and things that I might actually publish. And I end up rewriting almost all of the content in the process of going from a draft to a real thing. But it's basically how this bottom-up process of forming my ideas into articulated posts works. And so that's what this is tracking. The series architecture is clear. The thesis and ontology, we can get into this a little bit later, what this means with the .concepts folder. And you can see this breadcrumb trail section is what I was talking about before, those /crumb commands that help you build up this trace of how you've been thinking over time. And this means you can arrive at questions that can prompt me to start thinking. So, can we publish this post yet? How do these fit into the next post? Should this be in the public post to stay as a footnote for the meta expository framing? Good question. Matter of taste, I think, on that one. How could someone else take this seed and let it grow into their own way of thinking? This gets to a point that I want to talk about in this session. I think I captured notes about this in the previous recording as well. But I don't expect that someone should necessarily adopt my process one-to-one here. I ended up here doing capture, yeah. So I used capture and I dictated in this chunk of basically a stream of consciousness material. And I mean, you can pause and read this if you want, but I'm not going to dwell on it. And what this does when you run capture is, here we're using QMD, which is optional, but it's a way to quickly query all of the notes. it goes and searches for things that I've said in my content. So loop length grows over time. You have to discover your cognitive niche gradually is part of the point of this post that I'm working on. Your scope grows unpredictably, and if you have fixed processes that you can't iterate on, then you will kind of cap your ability to think. You can't install someone else's plugins for thinking that don't really work. You have to do the thinking. And it's also going to use the Obsidian CLI here to actually fetch the content of these notes. And then here we go. When you do capture, it gives you a proposed breakdown. So it thinks there are two ideas here. The loop horizons grow with experience. You can't see long loops until you run short ones. So the idea here being that you really don't want to prematurely abstract any kind of thinking system or install someone else's because you don't really know what you're looking for. The whole point of PyThink is to be just the essential ability to see what you've been doing. And one of the ways that it does this is a good time to mention this, is that if you're running the Pi version, Claude Code doesn't do this, but in Pi, there's an active trace of the session written in real time while you're having this discussion. So you can see here I did capture on loop horizons. There were 2 inbox notes created, which is the result of this discussion here. So this is like the roll up in real time as these sessions are happening of what you're talking about and thinking about. And this means nothing is ever lost. Like, you choose when to record things in higher detail or to put them into first-class notes or drafts, but the traces will let you know how you arrived at what you've been thinking about, even if all else fails. So this is the point of the plugin, is to make it easy to do something that would otherwise be kind of a pain, to always manually reflect on things at the end of sessions or what have you. This means you can just build up traces, and then you can run that reflect command later to look at them, and we'll see this in the session log. So it finds existing notes that might be related here, and then blah, 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 ask me if this is correct. I say, yes, I think it looks good. It makes some new notes in here, and then we created both notes and linked them together. What should we do next? And then I would have run /crum, which you're seeing printed out here, which does... Here we go. Breadcrumb dropped. So this is what a breadcrumb looks like. The themes in what you've been talking about, the top questions that emerge from what you have been saying in this given session, and then the trail of how these work and the kind of momentum of each of the entries. And then I used the reflect skill after that, which looks back on these traces and on these breadcrumb entries collectively and goes and reads the notes that are mentioned. And basically says, here's what stood out across all of these traces from the past couple of days for me here. Tool building and writing are a double helix. I like the way it put this. This is something I haven't said explicitly in my notes, but I've noticed that a lot of my investigations of hands-on tooling for building things and for managing ideas are very similar in terms of the meta principles that come out of it. Look, it sounds like it's criticizing me for not publishing the post. I'm going to publish the post. It will be published. This sounds like it's confused by the empty traces that can end up being stored if you just have sessions you quit immediately. It's noticing that this is the first time that I've demonstrated this in this latest version. I've been running this loop for a while, but I just moved it into Obsidian to make it much more legible from this point onwards. And... what would it take to ship this? How much does momentum depend on frictionless tooling? And, this is good. When does refining the tool become a way of staying in builder mode rather than entering writer mode? This is good. I'll just add a bit more to this, actually. This is a real danger of building tools for thought. You can end up chasing your own tail, just doing the thinking about the tools and not actually doing the thinking. And this is kind of the thesis I'm trying to make this first post wrap up, is that, you should use AI to think more and think more tactically, but also you think more ambitiously across broader scopes, across larger loops in time. All the things that you were like, that's way too much effort. I'll never be able to write this down or reflect on it or do these practices. You can encode them into tools and into feedback loops and into things that make it easy to do the right thing. I think I had this line, which is... make it easy to think the thought and then think the thought easily, which is some play on a coding idiom in the first place. But I have found it to be kind of true of this system where things just become apparent to you, and it's basically all talking to yourself with the LLM just acting as the scribe. Like, it doesn't really have to say anything to me that I'm not already saying in my past notes. In fact, this job is basically to do as little distortion in the process of recording this as possible. And so I think all this is to say, you might not get any benefit out of PyThink. You also might. I encourage you to give it a try, but I encourage you to think more about how you could apply this kind of logic of feedback loops and metacognitive thinking processes to your note-taking and your AI. So you can see here what it does when it digests a new piece of information. It's going to have a little bit of a look for anything related before suggesting any new notes. And this is what sessions look like. You just do this ongoing. I usually do a couple of these a day, but the point of the recent command is that you can make it fairly easy to pick it back up even if you forget what it was you were going on about last time. I think in future videos, something I want to try and highlight is that you can use this for lots of different domains, and you would cater the tooling and the set of things I would do specifically to each of those domains, like having ideas, for example, is sort of different to this, just like managing creative project ideas, I mean, and so is personal journaling or self-reflection. So that's something I want to focus on maybe in the next post/video combination. Okay, so Claude has come back with some more things. Tools for thought, tail chase, danger of the space unit, refining the meta system endlessly, good. Principle behind it, encode high cognitive practices. Describe and distortion on yourself. This already is existing notes, yeah. Yeah, and I find this is actually quite, I mean, maybe I'm just weird, but this is quite fun for me to just come and do a little bit of this. And it is gardening your notes, but it's gardening it with, maybe some power tools. Like, I'm not writing every single word down. I'm primarily driving it using voice interactions, which I think makes a big difference to how much of my personality ends up in these notes and my way of thinking compared to just pasting in links, for example. All right, and with that, I will end this recording and try and edit this down into something manageable for you to watch. Bye!